Welcome back to another new episode of the Coatings Pro interview series. I'm your host, Ben Dubose, and I'm a staff writer with Coatings Pro magazine. In this special episode, we're sharing another peek into one of our new features of the magazine in 2021, which is showcase profiles of longtime members of SSPC and/or NACE. This is being done to highlight the integration of SSPC, the Society for Protective Coatings, and NACE International, as well as to spotlight how the new combined organization known as AMP, the Association for Materials Protection and Performance, can best serve the coatings industry moving forward. Today, I'm joined by Kurt Hickox, Vice President of Business Development for Public Utilities Maintenance Incorporated. Based in Greater New York, the company describes itself as a global corrosion control contractor specializing in the electric transmission and distribution industry, and Kurt has worked there for more than 14 years. Kurt, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Ben. How are you today? I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
Doing well. Thank you for joining. And for our listeners, to give a little bit more background about Public Utilities Maintenance and their affiliation with SSPC, NACE, and now AMP, they obviously remain quite active as a coatings contractor, and they have active members in the New York and New Jersey legacy SSPC chapter. They are part of the PCCP/QP contractor group, and they've got QP1, QP2, and QS1 certified contractors. Employees at the company have also taken courses in lead paint removal, the C30 and the C5, which is the annual lead paint refresher. And as for Kurt, he has the PCS and C2 certifications and quality control supervisor training, along with NACE CIP1 certification. With that in mind, for today's show, we're going to be discussing some of the keys to success for both Kurt and his company over the years, as well as what they see as priorities for AMP and the broader coatings industry now that SSPC and NACE have combined. Kurt, I think a good place to start, if we could, is with your personal biography. Just tell our listeners about your career history and what it is that you do now with public utilities maintenance.
Well, I started in the business in 1982, a long time ago, with Keeler and Long Paint Manufacturing Company as a technical service rep, field technical service rep. And I was with them for about 15 years until they were acquired. Keeler and Long was acquired by PPG Industries. I was the national sales manager at that point at the time of the acquisition. And I stayed with PPG for another 10 years as a zone manager. And then I moved over to public utilities maintenance back in 2007 in my current role. I've been an active member of SSPC basically from a long time ago, 1990 maybe. Actually, probably before that, I was the Keeler and Long corporate representative to SSPC, and we participated in the annual conference every year, the trade shows, and then I have, since I came to work for Public Utilities Maintenance, again, been the SSP or the corporate representative to SSPC, and I've been active on several SSPC committees, standard committees, and that sort of thing, as well as in NACE, probably even more active on several committees. I was formerly the chairman of STG, not STG 41, TEG 368X, which was the Transmission and Distribution Standards Committee. I was the chair of two different task groups that wrote new standards for the transmission distribution industry relating to corrosion control issues. And I'm currently involved as a document program manager on the revision, updating of those standards. So I've been very active with the both organizations really for a long time. And my current role at PUM is both, my title is Vice President of Business Development. I'm also involved with, as Ben mentioned, the quality control, the technical service end of things, customer relations. I spend a lot of time in the field with customers and on job sites.
So as far as PUM, and that's short for Public Utilities Maintenance, for anyone not familiar, tell our listeners a little bit about your company, how they serve the coatings industry, basically just what it is that PUM does and the types of projects that you typically go out and complete.
Well, we've been in business since 1992, and our specific focus is the electric utility industry. And even within that industry, we really specifically focus in the transmission and distribution area. High voltage transmission towers and poles, substation structures, and equipment. It's a very niche, specialized field, but there are a lot of aspects to the corrosion issues in that particular market, and there's a lot of very specific requirements and working in those on those kind of structures and in those in that industry. So that's where our focus is, and 99% of the business that we do is in that focus. We work all over the United States. We work in Canada. We've worked abroad, but we work for power companies coast to coast. As I said, we started in 1992. We continue to be the largest and leading contractor in this industry. And as Ben mentioned earlier, as you mentioned earlier, we have the QP1, QP2, and QS1 certifications.
So when we talk about that type of utility infrastructure, what are the unique needs from those types of clients? I know you mentioned that you guys are basically specialists in that area, which can certainly be very helpful. When you talk to them about their needs, how is it different than other assets that need corrosion control? Basically, what are their current needs and challenges, and why are their needs such that a specialist like you guys at PUM is so useful?
Well, the challenges of corrosion control on these type of structures is really the key. It's obviously very important to keep the transmission towers and poles and substation equipment in operation. If a tower or pole falls down because of corrosion and takes the high voltage wires with it, large blackouts and customer interruptions and so forth would be the result. So, the reliability of the electric grid is of utmost importance in the United States from many areas, economically, security issues, all those are critical to the United States. So it's definitely in a utility's interest to keep their transmission distribution assets in working order. And the real challenge, though, is how to take care of the corrosion, how to mitigate the corrosion, and how to eliminate the corrosion. And when you're talking about the structures I'm talking about are range typically from 69,000 volts all the way up to 765,000 volt structures, circuits in the United States. There are a few structures that go up to 1,000 kilovolt, but most of the structures in the United States range from 69 kV to 765 kV. So you have, and when we're working on these structures, 95% of the time, they do not turn the electricity off. We work on them while the lines are energized. It's very, very difficult for a utility to be able to get an outage, to be able to turn the power off on these lines, especially in the summertime or in the painting season, because the demand for electricity is the highest at that point due to air conditioning and such. So they can't get outages. So we have to do them energized. So there's significant safety issues regarding that. I mean, there's OSHA regulations very specific to working on structures that are energized. So it's a whole different environment than painting a bridge or painting a water tank. So from that's one standpoint. The other standpoint is we are working at height. Typically, these structures are anywhere from 75 to 150 feet high. So we're working at height along with working around the energized electric equipment. So there's definite challenges involved. we're also out in the in the woods, in the hills and
Hmm.
valleys, and we're not working on a fixed job site, so it's very difficult access to these kind of structures. You can't bring all kinds of heavy equipment, or you're very limited to the kind of equipment that we can bring onto a job site. So we're not blasting things, we're not doing all kinds of fancy surface preparation. Uh, just from a logistical standpoint.
Hmm.
So you have to, we're using coatings that are designed for that kind of application. We're also using coatings that are, we're typically coating steel that is rusty, has old existing coatings on there. Most of the time, those existing coatings have lead on them. They're typically applied 30, 40, 50 years ago or more. So we have to deal with lead safety for our workers, lead safety for the environment. So there are many, many considerations that we have to take into account for on these projects. And our workers have to be specifically trained with those conditions in mind. Again, the safety issues are the utmost, the electrical safety, the
Hmm.
climbing safety, those are the most important things that we deal with. But the lead and just in general, all of the normal job site, industrial job site conditions that we encounter all come into play. So there are significant challenges, and that's again why we focus on this specific um, uh, area of work. We do not paint bridges, we don't paint water tanks. Our our people are all focused on what we do because of the significant safety issues and training issues and experience issues that they need to be able to do this kind of work.
So you've been doing this at PUM for nearly 15 years. What's something in the early 2020s that's different than the mid 2000s when you were starting out? What are some of the new technologies, materials, processes? What's something new that you're doing in 2021 to solve some of these corrosion issues for utilities relative to earlier in your career?
Probably the largest or the biggest technological change is the introduction of the rust penetrating sealers, the high solids penetrating sealers. Back earlier in my career, when we had to prime uh, a coating, if there was the typical product that we use, the tower paint that we use, is designed for minimally prepared steel. That's always been the case. They're long oil, zinc dust type coatings,
Hmm.
designed for high build application over corroded or previously painted steel. But there's a point where sometimes they need to be primed. And We used to use just alkyd primers. That was the state of the art, and that was the typical application when a primer was involved. But the problem with those was the amount of solids. They were typically 50, 55% solids by volume, and the problem when you were applying them over old coatings, that the solvent would work its way under the edges, no matter how well you prepared them, it would work its way under the edges, cause the old coatings to delaminate, um, and it was potential failure points. When the penetrating sealers were introduced, it really was a huge step forward in the fact that now we prepare these services and everything. As I mentioned, we're not blasting anything. We're not even doing power tool cleaning. You can't, when you're working on energized equipment, you can't have hoses and cables and all kinds of stuff. So we're using hand tools, scrapers, wire brushes. That's the typical extent of the service preparation that we're able to do. SSPC, SP2, hand tool cleaning. Um, we we so the advent of the sealers has really been a step forward in the long-term performance of these coating systems, because we still do the same service preparation, but now, especially when we're using 100% solids type um, penetrating sealers, you don't have that solvent issue. You don't have anything working under the edges of the old coatings to cause any kind of potential delamination of the primer and or the finish coat. So it's really been a big step forward in the longevity of the performance of the coding system.
So that's about how far we've come in the past 15 years that you've been at PUM. Let's look forward to the next 15 years per se. Are there any changes that you all are anticipating coming up? This can be, well, again, technologies, it can be materials, it can be demand from the utilities industry for certain types of projects. Just talk us through, if you could, what your market outlook is moving forward, and I suppose how PUM is adapting to what those changes could be.
I think the biggest challenge, Ben, in this industry is the way utilities fund this type of work. Um, Based on federal regulations, painting, what we typically are doing, technically, is considered a maintenance operation. And since the electric utility industry was deregulated several years ago, um, maintenance budgets went away at most utilities. Back in the day, they used to all have they set a maintenance budget of X dollars and they spent it on maintaining their infrastructure, whether it was transmission or generation or whatever. But when deregulation happened, maintenance went away. Utilities became more profit oriented, and maintenance was a cost off a charge off the bottom line, basically just came off. So utilities became much more focused on capital expenditures, construction, replacement, that sort of thing. That's been the biggest impact to the industry. And so a lot of utilities, there are many, many more utilities in the United States that do not do anything from a corrosion standpoint on their transmission structures. They'll replace them all the time, but they don't maintain them because of the economics and the accounting part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think going forward, the biggest change that will be required in this country to maintain the grid is to figure out a way of allowing a utility to use to change their accounting so they can use the capital money they have to use the budgets to do more corrosion control on their corrosion mitigation on their transmission system. They're in North America, or I should say, the United States and Canada. There's approximately 1 million steel high voltage transmission structures. That's an estimate, but it's a good estimate. In a normal year, a normal painting year, a few thousand, 5,000, 6,000 of them maybe are getting painted. Well, do the math. 5,000 or 6,000 out of 1 million is not really getting the job done. And there's been multiple studies. Most of the construction of the electric grid in North America was done back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. That was the bulk of it. Obviously, there were towers go all the way back to the turn of the 1900s, but the bulk of the structures, and they were galvanized steel, the bulk of them, they're all 50, 60, 70 years old now. They all need it, or a lot of them need it. A huge percentage need attention from a corrosion standpoint. And when you're only looking at, a few thousand, 5,000 or 6,000 out of 1 million a year, you're just not going to get there. So there needs to be a way to get that utilities can fund these projects better. And I think that's the biggest challenge from a utility standpoint, and that will certainly be the biggest effect on us or this business, is to get more work done. At the same token, the biggest challenge that we have are qualified workers to do this work. It's a very, very challenging job to do painting on a high voltage transmission structure. I explained already about the electrical safety, explained about the fall, working at height issues, fall protection. It's a very difficult job. You're away, you're on the road months and months at a time doing this work. So it's not a job for everybody, and unfortunately, there's not a large pool of qualified people out there to do this work, and that pool seems to be shrinking every year. So you have that's a big obstacle, especially if they do if more and more utilities do start figuring out how to fund this and use capital money, and or if the government decides to um, rewrite the regulations allowing capital money to be used to do corrosion mitigation. That's going to be a big stumbling block, is to find the right kind of people, the qualified people to do this work.
We're joined now by Kurt Hickox, Vice President of Business Development for Public Utilities Maintenance Incorporated. I'm Ben Dubose, staff writer with Coatings Pro Magazine. And again, this is our ongoing showcase profile series in which we're highlighting some of the longtime successful members of SSPC and NACE. We led off this podcast by mentioning some of the various certifications for Kurt and the team over at PUM. And I want to turn our focus back to some of those association dynamics for the remainder of our chat. Kurt, how would you say that, and I suppose this can be both for you and the company, that your affiliations, your certifications, and whatnot with SSPC and NACE, how would you say that those have helped the company and or your personal career? Again, this can be certifications, this can be education initiatives, it can be the in-person dynamic from networking at conferences. Just talk about, if you could, how the organizations SSPC and NACE have helped you guys and PUM over your career.
Well, it's really all of the above. Everything that you just mentioned have been a big benefit. Obviously, the trade shows and the conferences and the networking to that is always a plus. We've met many people over the years, both at the SSPC conferences and the NACE conferences, that have helped us, that we've turned into customers, long-term customers. So that's a big step right there. But the committee involvement, from my personal standpoint and my business standpoint, has probably, I think, in my opinion, been the most beneficial. We've been, as I mentioned earlier, I was involved as the chairman of a couple of task groups, NACE task groups, that we actually wrote the very first joint standards between NACE and the IEEE, which is the International Electronic Engineers Association. We wrote the very first standards, joint standards, on corrosion control by coatings in the transmission and distribution industry. We identified a real need from utilities who really didn't have a strong knowledge of corrosion issues relating to the T&D industry, and that was one of the stumbling blocks for them not to have active programs, because they really didn't know how to do it, where to start. So the decision was made 15 years ago or whatever to say, let's put some standards together that'll help these utilities put a program together. So it'll help more and more utilities do transmission and distribution corrosion control and mitigation. And so we wrote these standards. We published them. NACE published them. IEEE published them. And as I mentioned, we're now updating them, doing our 5-year update. And they've been very useful. I've had many utilities. I've spoken with many utilities about these standards and how useful they were in putting together a program or helping them improve their existing program. And not only is it help from their standpoint, but it's given me the opportunity to meet some utility folks and help them personally with their program. So it's been a big plus, both from I think anyway, from their standpoint, as well as from our standpoint, my standpoint, and my company's standpoint. Standards committees, now in the new organization, AMP, they've kind of reorganized, revamped the standards committee effort, and that's still ongoing. And I think they're putting together a pretty good organization. And I'm very active in the SC11, which is the power industry standards committee, and I think it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be a good thing for the industry, and it will be a good thing for me personally, my company, and anybody who decides to participate. I heartily encourage it.
What would your advice be to someone new to either your company or I suppose the industry at large? How can someone that's a newcomer use an association like, well, over the years, SSPC and NACE, and now, of course, AMP? How can someone new to the industry use the association resources to advance their career, much like you obviously have over the last 15 plus years?
Well, again, I would definitely encourage involvement in the standards committee. You don't have to be the ultimate expert to participate. Any amount of knowledge or, any standpoint, coming from any standpoint helps when with these committees. But definitely would recommend if getting involved in there's a whole list of different ones and different focuses. But I definitely would say that would be a good place to start, not only from learning things, but from meeting people. There are a lot of great people on these committees that are very active. There are in person. I mean, a lot of it's been, of course, virtual meetings the last couple of years, but there are in person meetings both at the conference and working committee meetings. Definitely is a good way to get involved. I would, again, heartily encourage that. And go to the conferences. There's a lot of very good information that is put out at the meetings, at the conferences, good presentations on a wide range of subjects. I'd be very interested to see how the new joint conferences work out. I don't believe there have been any of the joint ones yet. The last SSPC only one is in December, I think, and then starting in 2022, there'll be a joint conference. It'll be very interesting to see how that goes because in the past, the focuses of the two organizations have been a little bit different from a audience standpoint, and now that they're going to be combined, I'll be interested to see how that all goes. But I would encourage participation in those, or at least attendance in those, to sit and see the presentations as well as the networking opportunities.
Yeah, exactly right. Coatings Plus is in December, and then in March 2022 is when we have the first annual conference under the AMP umbrella. That will be March 2022. Kurt, this has been great insight. Before we sign off, for anyone listening that wants to get more information from you or from PUM, where can they get that? Feel free to toss out, your website, social media, anything that you or PUM wants to plug that you think an interested listener could potentially use to get started.
If anybody would like to speak with me about anything that we talked about here, have any questions, my email is my name, CurtHickcox @PUMINC.com. Kurt Hickox at PUMINC.com. Our website, which is PUMINC.com, www.puminc.com, offers a lot of information and details about what we do, how we do it, the experience that we've had, specifically relating to this work that we've talked about today. So I'd be welcome to speak with anybody who has any interest or has any questions. I have over the years authored several papers and performed several presentations at SSP and NACE meetings, and I'd be happy to provide copies of any of those as well that might be of interest. And again, relating specifically to electric transmission distribution, coatings, and corrosion control and mitigation.
Excellent. Folks, this is where we will leave things on today's episode. And I should mention from our end of things, if you want more information or resources, you can, of course, check out the AMP website at ampp.org, amp.org. And you can also visit coatingspromag.com for all sorts of news related to the protective coatings industry. For Kurt Hickox, I'm Ben Dubose. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new podcast from the Coatings Pro interview series.
Thank you.
This message comes to you from Coatings Pro Magazine, the official media publication for Coatings Plus. Join us for this exciting final year of Coatings Plus, happening from December 13 to 16, 2021. Coatings Plus is a jam-packed event with expert-led protective, marine, and industrial coatings programming, as well as technical sessions and workshops focused on surface preparation, application, coating formulation, testing, inspection, and green coating solutions. Visit sspc.org/coatings-2021 for more information. We can't wait to see you there.